For decades, we were told that eating too much sugar is perfectly fine as long as you don't eat too much fat. But what if someone had an interest in making sure people didn't hear the truth about sugar? Well, it turns out that someone did, and that someone was the sugar industry. Our story begins with a group of scientists at Harvard who published a paper linking heart disease to the consumption of saturated fat and cholesterol. They suggested cutting back on butter, meat, and dairy products, which just so happened to be some of the most popular foods at the time. The paper was published in 1957, and it made a big splash. Soon, people everywhere were watching their cholesterol intake. But 7 years later, the sugar industry funded a study that undermined the findings. It was a brilliant strategy because by shifting the public's attention away from sugar and onto fat, they successfully managed to protect one of the most profitable food industries in the world. Let me explain. See, sugar is made from plants like sugarcane and sugar beets. And for centuries, it was considered a luxury good. After all, it takes a lot of work to turn plants into sweets, so sugar used to be expensive. That all changed in the 1800s when new technologies made sugar cheaper than ever. Suddenly, everyone was putting sugar in everything. People were adding it to milk. They were putting it in soda. They were even putting it in their cereal. Basically, sugar went from being a treat to being a staple. And that was great for the sugar industry. The more sugar people ate, the more money they made. But then in the 1950s, scientists started linking sugar to all sorts of health problems, including obesity, diabetes, heart disease, tooth decay, and even cancer. That gave the sugar industry a problem. If people knew how bad sugar was for them, they might cut back. So the sugar industry did what any good business would do. They tried to influence the research. At first, they focused on downplaying the risks of sugar. For example, in 1958, the Sugar Research Foundation hosted a conference where scientists discussed ways of minimizing the harmful effects of sugar. One scientist suggested adding vitamins to sugar products. Another scientist suggested pairing sugar with protein. But those strategies didn't work. By the 1960s, scientists had gathered enough evidence to show that sugar really was bad for you. So the industry needed a new plan, and that's when they met with a group of Harvard scientists. The sugar industry proposed a research project that would shift the blame for heart disease away from sugar and onto fat. Now, there's no evidence that the Harvard scientists knew the true effects of sugar going into this project. But whoever funded the research controlled the results. In the end, the scientists concluded that the consumption of saturated fat and cholesterol, not sugar, was to blame for heart disease. And that led to decades of bad health advice. For example, in 1973, the American Heart Association published a paper that linked dietary fat to heart disease. The paper recommended reducing the consumption of saturated fats and cholesterol, and the advice has remained unchanged for decades. That same year, the New York Times ran a story about the dangers of cholesterol. The article warned that consuming too much cholesterol could lead to clogged arteries. And again, that advice has remained unchanged for decades. Now, I should point out that consuming too much cholesterol can be bad for you, but it's also true that our bodies produce all the cholesterol that we need. You see, our cells use cholesterol to build healthy tissues. They use it to make hormones and vitamin D. They even use it to help digest fats. So if the body produces all the cholesterol it needs, why is high cholesterol bad for you? Well, it's because too much cholesterol can congeal and block your arteries. But that doesn't happen because you eat cholesterol. It happens because you eat too many refined carbohydrates. When your body breaks down those carbohydrates, it releases a chemical called triglycerides. If you have too many triglycerides in your blood, they can block your arteries. And guess what food is mostly made up of carbohydrates? Sugar. So despite what doctors have been telling us for decades, it's sugar, not fat, that's the real problem. And it turns out that the sugar industry knew that all along. I should point out that the sugar industry isn't the only one that's influenced medical research. Back in the 1970s, the tobacco industry funded a bunch of studies that cast doubt on the link between smoking and lung cancer. Those studies failed, and I'm currently working on a video about how the tobacco industry is still trying to cover up the truth about their deadly product. If you want to watch that video when it comes out, make sure you subscribe. And if you want to learn more about the sugar industry, check out the sources. Until next time, stay sweet.